This podcast is discussing an academic paper on translation. It was originally made by the website Academia EDU, completely independently of the paper's author. The podcast audio is used here with added video footage and minor additions for better clarity. Wait for the paper author's comment right after the podcast.
Hello and welcome to In Depth with Academia. Today we're diving into some fascinating academic insights with a focus on a paper titled The Logic That Can't Be Lost by Dmitry Yermolovich.
Or, if translated literally from its Russian version, is singing without a sound. This phrase originates from a catchphrase in a film where a show host absurdly introduced a singer by saying she would sing without a sound. What he actually meant was that she would perform without a sound of objection, but the phrase ended up clashing with the context.
Okay, let's explore what Yermolovich's paper has to offer. Now, the focus of this paper is on a translation contest. Yeah, that's right, a whole competition where participants translate a passage from English into Russian. You might be wondering, why should I care about a translation contest? Well, here's the catch. The paper is not just about translations themselves, but about what the translations reveal about cultural and linguistic patterns. And that's something you don't want to miss. So the big question Yermolovich addresses is, how do Russian speakers, both professionals and amateurs, approach the task of translating foreign texts into their native language? It's significant because it gives us a glimpse into the active, cognitive and cultural processes at play during translation. We're talking about an understanding of not just languages, but of the essence embedded within them, the values and mindsets that could vary depending on who is doing the translating. Let's take a look at the findings and the methods. The paper outlines how 42 translations of an excerpt from Jonathan Franzen's novel Freedom were analysed. The group was diverse, professional translators alongside amateurs. Everyone had a go. And, get this, no first prize was awarded. Nobody hit the mark well enough to snag the top spot. Surprising, huh? The best translation only earned a second prize. So, why might this be significant? This indicates the inherent difficulties and nuances in translation, maybe pointing to a common struggle or misconception among Russian translators. And speaking of misconceptions, one thing Yermolovich found is a tendency for translators to flatten the expressive qualities of the text, losing some of the nuances that the original English text presented. They sometimes steered into over-literal translations or over-simplified stylistic elements. Now, let's consider the methodology briefly. The paper doesn't just list translations, it critiques them, analysing syntax, word choice, and the all-important tone. You know, the feel of a piece. Yeah, it's like when someone tells a joke, but they say it all wrong. That delivery, right? Translating isn't just about swapping words, it's about capturing that delivery. Alright, let's pause here. Ever tried reading War and Peace in a few sittings? Well, the passage under scrutiny described a character doing just that, engaging in a reading marathon. Contestants had to capture this urgency and intensity in their translations. However, many leaned towards transforming the frenetic pacing into something more plodding. It's like you want the reader to feel that energy flipping pages, not to lull them to sleep. Let's digress a bit. You ever notice how language changes when you're passionate about something, whether it's books or coding, saying, "Oh, I devoured that novel," versus "I finished the book." Conveying emotion through text, there's this vivid liveliness, right? Okay, coming back to the paper, reflections like these make you appreciate the element of voice in translation, and it's also teaching us that every tiny decision in word choice and structure can alter the bigger picture. It raises introspective questions. Do we tend to simplify complex ideas due to habit, comfort, or cultural perspectives? How often do we lose critical nuances? And Yermolovich's paper seems to also, signal something educators can take into account. When teaching translation, how can we instill a sense of preserving original sentiment and not veer into unintended territory. A fascinating thought, don't you think? As we near the end of our session today, let's emphasize this. Translation as presented by Yermolовich is like looking into a two-way mirror. It shows how we approach language and how language shapes our understanding of other cultures. Remember, academic research like this isn't about delivering hard truths, it's about sparking conversations and opening minds. Keep thinking about how language isn't just about words we use, but the world views they carry. Until next time, stay curious.
And now the concluding comments by the paper's author, Dmitry Yermolовich.
I like this podcast because it captures several of my key ideas, like the importance of observing pace or tempo, and of the author's tone in translation, such as his irony, the danger of poor delivery or flattening expressive details, and especially the crucial point that every tiny decision in translation can change the bigger picture. That said, it made me smile to hear certain ideas attributed to my paper that aren't actually there, such as translators' mindsets or cultural perspectives. I can't speak to those mindsets, nor are they relevant here. Cultural differences don't really come into play here because the text chosen for the translation contest touches on universal human traits and emotions and revolves around the plot of a Russian novel which is already part of the contestants' culture. What this text does require, however, is a solid familiarity with the subject, specifically the plot and characters of Tolstoy's War and Peace, so that no inadvertent mistakes slip into the translation. I also emphasize in my paper that a good literary text is always a system of language devices. Every element, from word choice to sentence structure, from metaphor to punctuation, works together in synergy and harmony. The translator's job is to recreate an equally harmonious system. Unfortunately, that's something the podcast overlooks. Of course, translation isn't just about swapping words. This statement is repeated so often it's become a cliché. I've tried to show that both being too literal and too liberal in translation carry equal dangers. The latter risk is sometimes underestimated by translation teachers. An unsystematic approach can produce a text where some elements contradict others, resulting in what I call singing without a sound. In any case, I hope this podcast and my comments encourage some of you to read the full paper. You'll find links here and in the description, both to the PDF on Academia EDU and for online reading. And if Russian isn't your strong suit, online translation tools are there to help. Feel free to send your comments and take care.